If you're looking to build a budget gaming PC in 2026, this combo might just be the hidden gem you were looking for. With GPU prices and especially RAM prices skyrocketing, this setup could be the perfect solution for a lot of gamers out there. Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's ETA Prime back here again. Today, we're going to be putting together a budget gaming PC, and this is turning out to be one of my favorite combos so far. With prices on everything being absolutely ridiculous, I did find a way to kind of save some money building something like this, and it's going to handle any AAA game at 1440p. And there's actually a couple ways to go about this. I'm going to go over all the parts used, and I will leave links in the description along with some alternatives that will be a bit cheaper. But just keep in mind, you might see a little less performance on top. But either way, you'll still end up with a really nice gaming rig. Starting out here with the motherboard and CPU. I picked the motherboard up over on Amazon. It's a refurbished B660 MSI that supports DDR4, and that's really important here given DDR5 prices. And of course, with something like this, we needed to choose a CPU that supports DDR4, but we also wanted to get some pretty decent performance. So what I've got here is the Intel Core i5-12600K. 10 cores, 16 threads, and you could go with something a bit lower end if you want to, but keep in mind the non-K variant of the 12600 is actually a 6-core, 12-thread part. I mean, you'll still be able to game on it, but having those extra cores will definitely help out. And right now, you can find a pretty decent deal over on eBay picking up a used 12600K anyway. When it comes to storage, I opted to use a 1TB Kingston M.2 SSD. Nothing fancy here, and I've got a little heat sink. These are super cheap over on eBay just to keep everything nice and cool. I do believe this motherboard originally had an M.2 heatsink that came with it, but since it's refurbished from Amazon, it didn't come with it, unfortunately. Next thing we need to talk about here is RAM, and the reason I went with an older chipset is because this chipset supports DDR4. It's much cheaper than DDR5 right now, which is just way overpriced. A lot of people are just going to be priced out of building something that supports DDR5 right now. So I've got 16 gigs of DDR4 running at 3200 megatransfers per second. I bought this around 4 months ago on Amazon. It's a nice little Team Force kit. It was $28 ship. Right now, this same kit is like $130 over there. So buy used for sure over on eBay. You can find a pretty decent deal. Now we need a way to cool that 12600K, and I went with something tried and true. This is a Cooler Master Hyper 212. It's the black version with RGB because it does seem that RGB fans and, coolers with RGB are a bit cheaper than non-RGB. If it was up to me and they were the same price, I would have opted for no RGB, but, you kind of get what you get right now. So we've got the motherboard put together, we've got our RAM, CPU, cooler, M.2 SSD, everything's looking pretty nice here. This motherboard does have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth built in, and it's actually a micro-ATX form factor. And I went with micro-ATX because we can get cases that are a bit smaller, and it's still not going to break the bank like mini ITX. And the case I use for this build is the Rosewill FBM X5. Nothing fancy, and I've got a 600-watt cheaper power supply installed in this thing. This does support AIOs up front or up top, but it only comes with one fan in the rear. So I got a 3-pack of these N-Win RGB fans for pretty cheap. They were on clearance. And again, if I could have found non-RGB for the same price or cheaper, I would have. But I've got 3 120mm fans to throw up front here. We'll go ahead and throw the motherboard in here, and this Hyper 212 does fit inside of this Rosewill case. We can put the side panel on, it's not going to interfere. And it's a pretty plain Jane case. We wanted to keep the cost down, so we're really not going to see the internals when we have the side panel on, but it's not going to hit that Hyper 212 cooler. So what I'm going to do now is just wire everything up. I also need to get those front fans installed, and then we can move over to the GPU. So we've got everything set up. We're ready for a GPU. I've got those 3 fans up front. We're not using an AIO or anything like that. I think we're going to get enough airflow through this Rosewill case. And when it comes to a GPU, there are tons of choices out there. But right now with GPU prices, there's 2 that I'm going to be recommending for a build like this. First one being the Intel Arc B570. It's got 10 gigs of ERAM. You only need one 8-pin power connector. And these brand new over on Newegg are anywhere from $189 up to $219. I've got the ASRock version here. It's a great little card, and it's one that I can highly recommend if you're looking to save some cash. But I'm going to take it up a step for this build and go with the Intel Arc B580. Little higher performance. We've got 20 Xe2 cores instead of 16 like the B570. and I've been keeping an eye on eBay. These are going anywhere from $230 up to $280, depending on who makes the card. This is the Intel version, and it's definitely one of my favorite looking GPUs out there. But if you wanted to go with that B570, just keep in mind, I mean, you're still going to see great 1440p performance with some XeSS enabled. This one also requires only one 8-pin power connector, and once it's all put together, it looks a little something like this. And to tell you the truth, I wasn't expecting it to look this good with this Rosewill case, but given that, we've got the black case, black GPU, black cooler, I think it turned out really nice. And we'll have just a little bit of RGB peeking through when the side panel's on, so it's definitely not overdoing it. The first thing I did here was just run a couple benchmarks, and I wanted to face this off against something a bit cheaper and something a bit newer and more expensive. So at the top, we've got that 12600K, 10 cores, 20 threads in this board. Single core, 2602. Multi-core, 12302. Going down a bit to the Intel Core 12600 non-K version, 6 cores, 12 threads, 2384 on single, and 9644 multi. And finally, we've got the newer AMD Ryzen 9800 X3D. This is a really awesome chip for gaming. Single core, of course, beating everything out with a 3188, and then moving over to multi, 13,621. Now, this doesn't tell the whole story. When it comes to gaming, this X3D is definitely going to beat out the 12600 or the 12600K. But if you're going to build with that 9800 X3D right now, you got to keep in mind you will have to use DDR5 RAM for that. Newer motherboard, everything's going to be more expensive for a system like that. So given the price difference, when it comes to Geekbench 6, that 12600K is looking really good right now. Moving over to some GPU benchmarks with this whole build, we've got 3D Mark Steel Nomad coming in with a pretty impressive 3094. And finally, Time Spy with the 14,246. And remember, we've got that Intel Arc B580 here. This score is looking great, especially given that we've got it paired up with the 12600K right now. I mean, I'm pretty impressed here, but these are synthetic benchmarks, and now it's time to see how this thing handles real-world gaming. Checking out Cyberpunk 2077 at Ultra, and at that Ultra preset, XeSS is set to quality. Not bad at all. We're seeing a decent frame rate here, and taking it down to high will net us much more. By the end of this run, I had an average of 71 FPS, and there's ways to get a lot more out of this. Recently, Intel announced that we will be getting XeSS multi-frame gen for the B570 and B580. I did a video a few days ago on the MSI Claw showing you how to enable multi-frame gen on these Xe2 based GPUs. Well, over there it's an iGPU. But it does work here, and I did it with just this one game, so this is the only game we're going to be taking a look at with any type of frame gen enabled. So it's actually XeSS multi-frame gen, and if we go into our Intel graphics software, you can see we've got XeSS frame generation override. You can go to 2x, 3x, or 4x, and this will be coming to the official driver, but right now I basically had to hack this driver to work with XeSS multi-frame gen on this GPU. But with it enabled in Cyberpunk 2077 at 1440p Ultra with XeSS frame gen set to X4, we're over 240 FPS on average with this game. And it does feel really nice, even with just XeSS frame gen on, which this does support. So it'll basically double our frame rate. We're going to get a much higher frame rate there. It feels a lot smoother. And yeah, I mean, we've got fake frames going, but this is something that can really help out, especially for these lower cost builds. And in my opinion, I mean, if I'm not going to spend $2,500 on a GPU to build a PC right now, I don't mind using frame gen here at all. The next game I tested here was Spider-Man 2. We're at 1440p high with XeSS set to quality. And going to very high, this will kind of fall in its face with the B580. Like most mid-range cards right now, it's just one of those games we'll have to drop down the high, but it still looks good here. This setup actually handled Red Dead Redemption 2 really well. We're at 1440p with a high ultra mix, just that little slider bar. I could go through and just set it all to high or try all ultra, but I don't think we do all ultra on this without some scaling. So this is native 1440p. We're seeing an average of around 78 FPS. Of course, we did test out Forza Horizon 5, 1440p Ultra, no scaling, and having that 12 gigs of VRAM really does help out going up to these higher settings. This is one that at Ultra with 8 gigs of VRAM is just not going to perform very well because we're basically going over that 8 gigs at Ultra 1440p. We've got enough here to kind of load it all the way up, and it feels great, over 140 FPS on average. And finally, Arc graders at 1440p high with XeSS set to balanced, over 100 FPS on average. And this is the third time that I'm playing the game. It felt like I ran around for like 30 minutes and couldn't find anything. There was nobody. Actually, I did see one person kind of just run by me real quick, but I didn't encounter any enemies or anything like that. I just kind of got to get into the game a bit more for sure. The last thing I wanted to talk about here were CPU and GPU temps, and this is really going to differ depending on what case you're using, what cooler, if you've got front fans, side fans, it's really up to how you've got everything set up. But with the side panel on, using that Hyper 212 cooler, our average temps on the CPU were 64, and the maximum I recorded was 73. As for that Intel Arc B580, again, it's really going to depend on what model you're using, but average 1440p temps were 62, and the maximum I recorded was only 68 degrees Celsius. So I'm not worried about this thing thermal throttling, and even though I've got those 3 fans up front, this thing was actually really quiet. It didn't ramp up that much at all. I was pretty surprised. Overall, I really do like the performance that I'm seeing out of this setup here, and even though it's a pretty plain Jane case, we don't have a nice clear side panel on this, no glass or anything, it looks pretty good. It's a very minimalistic design that gets the job done. And going with the 12th gen Intel CPU isn't going to appeal to everybody out there, but given part prices right now, I do think that this is a very viable option, and you definitely need to keep your eye out on eBay and Amazon for refurbished and used parts. But that's going to wrap it up for this build. If you're interested in putting something like this together, I'll leave links to everything I used in the description below, along with some cheaper alternatives. And I've always got my eye out for good deals on parts. So if you want to see another build using something different, make sure you hit that like button and think about subscribing so you know when I post the next one. But that's it for this one. Like always, thanks for watching.